Hey, DC United faithful.
All right, we're back. Hopefully you can hear us this time.
Should we move on to Red Bulls Montreal like we're trying to do before we got the expansion draft breakdown?
Did we finish, Thomas? Did you finish your expansion draft breakdown?
I mean, I think so. I gave you a list. I don't know if it exactly added up to 11 names, but I give you my thoughts.
Thomas, do you want to go through the rest of the teams in MLS and give us your list?
Every single one.
Yeah, I'm going to start with the Chicago Fire. So they definitely need to protect Matt Polzella.
Thomas, no. Thomas, we got to take control of this show.
Yeah, let's talk about Red Bulls Montreal.
So Montreal, much as they did against DC United.
Let's talk about Red Bulls Marco Piatti. I'm sorry, Montreal.
Marco.
Oh, not Joe Piatti. Sorry. It was a Marco Di Vaio, Ignacio Piatti mashup, I guess. Pretty good player.
Yeah, well, like against DC United, Montreal showed that they are pretty much the masters of counterattack at this point, and much of that is because they have the perfect counterattack player in Marco Nacho Piatti, who can just pretty much kill a defense when he gets the ball with a little bit of space to run into. We saw that again against New York. So clearly this series worked out perfectly for Montreal, but for New York, it's strange. You can talk all you want about the fluky nature of the playoffs. It's a 34-game season, and it comes down to one or two bad performances. But there is something going on with New York in the playoffs because they lost 2 games between June 22nd and the start of the playoffs. And they entered the playoffs on a 20-game unbeaten streak in all competitions, and then they lost twice in a week.
Yeah, but is this maybe something as simple as, so much is made of the fact that you have to be in form heading into the playoffs, but, for my money, I think it's important to be in form the last 2 games of the season. I think if you run off a 10-game unbeaten streak, or, you run out of gas eventually. You know what I mean? First of all, I think it was all bullshit to begin with, But if you want to talk about momentum, I don't think being on a 20-game unbeaten streak, heading into the playoffs is any more helpful than being on a 3-game unbeaten streak.
I will even say you don't even necessarily have to be in form for the last 2 games of the season. Montreal kind of limped into the playoffs. Their last match was a loss in New England when they had this kind of mix of starters and reserves, and they're a team that just figured it out in the knockout round and have been riding that momentum that was non-existent in the regular season, and they established the moment the postseason started. And the playoffs are long. It takes 6 weeks to get through this. So.
Yeah, there have been tons of teams, by the way, that have rolled into the playoffs and crashed out in the first round. Like, this is, I can't remember where I read this, but 7 or 8 since 2004 that had significant unbeaten streaks that just crashed out in the opening round to lower seeds.
And we have to mention Mauro Biello's decision to bench Didier Drogba, because when a coach makes a decision like this to bench a star player, the team's highest paid player, one of the league's most high profile,
could have cost him his job, man.
It's risky.
Yeah.
And this decision could not have gone any better for Biello, the way that things have worked out. Not only has Montreal won more games since this happened, not only have they found a replacement for Drogba who's better in Mancosu, but Drogba has fallen in line and just accepted this role off the bench. And then you saw yesterday he actually came off the bench and laid on a really nice assist for Piatti.
And Biello, in general, I think has, at this point, 2 seasons in, you have to say that he's a pretty good playoff coach. Last season, he made this fantastic tactical adjustment for their knockout round game against Toronto, where he shifted Piatti out to the left flank. Up to that point, Piatti had mostly been playing centrally, and I remember it was Toronto's right back, I think, was Jackson, and much the same way, Piatti took advantage of Nick DeLeon this year. Piatti torched Jackson last season, and I think Biello has now established this ability to pick the right lineups, make the right decisions, expose tactical weaknesses in his opponent in the postseason. And he's a guy who, when you go up against him in October and November, when these games start to matter, he's a coach who I think has shown that he's up there among the best in the league in terms of just tactically putting together a game plan that works in big games.
He does the whole thing in French. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, and you can look at Montreal's lineup too, and you can see last season and this season in the playoffs, they're playing better than the sum of their parts. They have two elite MLS players right now in Simon and Piatti, and outside of that, I don't know. I mean, who on that roster is really a above average MLS level starter?
They're getting the most of some solid role players, but veteran guys who have been through this before and know how to step up in the playoffs. I'm looking at someone like Patrice Bernier, who last season, I think he only made like 6 regular season starts and then was in the lineup for every playoff game, scored a couple goals. This year, again, he's in and out of the starting lineup, but then once the postseason rolls around, they put him in there game in, game out, and even though he's 37 years old, he has the veteran presence to succeed in that type of environment.
I mean, dude, there are 3 advanced players combined to be over 100 years old. I'm serious. It's incredible.
Is that a real statistic?
Yeah.
Oh. Does it? Okay. Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thomas did a quick fact check because
Yeah.
he thinks that everything I say is bullshit, but
Not everything is. A lot of it.
Can I make a quick detour to point out our latest addition to the Ben Olsen soundboard?
Please do.
Quick setup on this. Ben Olsen wasn't in a good mood, go figure, after his red-hot DC United side crashed out to the Montreal Impact. Came in, answered a couple of questions. Friend of the show and friend of all of ours, Travis Clark, was
such a good friend.
Such a good friend. I can't even remember his last name. Travis Top Drawer Soccer, I think is his last name. Was just sitting there with just a normal look on his face, and Ben Olsen made a detour in the middle of one of his answers to just say
something funny.
Really, really aggressive stuff there by Ben. I don't know.
The next move was to invite Travis out to meet him in the parking lot after the game.
Hey, let me ask you something. Something funny?
We will treasure this addition to the soundboard.
Something funny? Go home.
Pablo, I hate to do this to you, but we're gonna have to talk about your beloved NYCFC.
Nope.
Yeah, yes, we have to.
Oh man, what a shit show! I mean, at least I got it over with early. So thoroughly and quickly exposed for their dedication to building out of the back. I especially enjoyed, I don't know, did you guys watch the entire game? Alexi Lawless's mid-game eulogy of their season, basically, Well,
when it's like a 5 or 6 goal margin.
Sure. We've been there before with NYCFC.
You gotta
down 7, down 8,
Yeah, you got to go to the archives and find stuff to talk about as a broadcaster. It's no longer interesting enough to just describe what's going on the field. You got to keep the viewers engaged, and they're not going to be engaged by that game, although it was pretty entertaining, even with the score out of hand, to see how badly NYC continued to just mess everything up.
It would have been. Did you guys see the Frederic Brilliant's near own goal that just grazed the outside of the post?
When was that?
Second half.
After I had stopped paying attention.
Yeah, he just a ball came across the area. He's probably 8 yards from goal, and he just very calmly, with the inside of his foot, played it, across the end line, but almost scored on himself, which would have been incredible.
I think we do need to discuss the pretty obvious weaknesses that have been exposed in Patrick Vieira as a coach. So he's a finalist for MLS Coach of the Year. All things considered, I think you could say they had a successful first season, but then there are some outliers that really sting. Obviously, this playoff game, the 7-0 home loss to the Red Bulls in May, and in general, the number of times they have been just brutally exposed for building out of the back when they do not have the defenders or the goalkeeper to do that,
I mean,
or
there's just
or the
like
home field.
This is just there's the other side of that coin though, where it's like, if you're trying to instill a style in a team, obviously there are going to be growing pains, and I think. I mean, I of any MLS team, honestly, I'm most curious to see what they do in the offseason, because you figure Lampard gone, Pirlo, does he have a year left on his deal? He's 37 either way. Their back line needs a complete overhaul. Their midfield needs to be reshaped drastically at the offload mix. They could honestly use a better goalkeeper. I don't know that either Saunders.
You think so?
I don't know. I'm curious to see what they do. I mean, if they get capable players in certain roles, I think certainly you're not going to see any more 7-0s next year.
I think their defense could use a TFC-esque makeover where you get solid MLS veterans and stop relying on iffy European acquisitions. Sure. And but is there something to be said for instilling a philosophy at your club that is completely impractical with your home field?
I mean, was it completely impractical? They had one of the best records in MLS.
They were better away than at home, or it was
actually
at least close.
At the end of the year, it pretty much evened out.
Yeah,
because they started sucking on the road too.
Well, yeah, but the thing about the overhaul, like Thomas mentioned, the TFC like overhaul is it's a lot more difficult to do that when you're looking for such a specific kind of defender. It's not just somebody who is good defensively. They have to be able to fit this style of building out of the back. And I'm just not sure where Vieira finds that group of players within MLS available to him to add to the roster in the offseason.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of guys who I don't want to get too much into the weeds of armchair GMing this. That is difficult. You're not going to find the average MLS journeyman who can build out of the back. That is pretty tricky. And I'll say, I mean, there are a couple decent pieces there. I mean,
Matarrita. Yeah,
Matarrita is. He has some defensive deficiencies he still needs to work on.
I'm going to say like Jefferson Mena has shown at times to be a decent. Hernandez should be like jettisoned into space.
I'm not big on Mena. I actually think Brian, like he actually was pretty good this year. I feel like he's a solid number 2 center back, but if you're going in with him as your top central defender and then this rotating cast, Chanot, Hernandez, Mena, that is more of an issue. I don't get why Ethan White never got more of a chance. He's actually pretty good when it comes to building out the back, and he just got buried on their depth chart.
Yeah, I think from what I've heard, from those around NYCFC, including some of the players, Vieira is the kind of coach where you can go from, and there are good and bad parts to this, but you can go from being in the 11 game to not even in the 18 the next game to back to being in the starting lineup the game after.
And you can also go from being in the 11 game to not being in the 18 the rest of the season.
To not playing ever again. To tweeting asking fans what your team did wrong after the first round loss. To, man, what's going to happen to Mix Diskerud? I mean, he'll pop up at another MLS team for like 175 or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty crazy how fast he's fallen, and you wonder how much of that has to do with just his incompatibility with New York style, with having both Pirlo and Lampard on the team and needing to get minutes. There's no way that Mix Diskerud is this bad. Like, he is not.
Here's a very quick question. Say this is Pirlo's last game with NYCFC. I mean, we can rate him as a pretty unequivocal failure, right? In MLS?
I'll say, I mean...
You wanted to see him hit, like, a couple of set-piece goals.
Right. I mean, when you actually look at the numbers, he actually was among the top chance creators in MLS this season, and that was playing a little more of a deeper role than all the guys who finished ahead of him. He's not way high up the field in an advanced spot the way Sasha Kljestan and Piatti and Lee Nguyen are. So just looking at the statistics, he quietly was effective, but he wasn't really the, however much money he's making, several $1 million-esque player that they were paying for. But going forward, it will be interesting to see if they stick with him. What's going to happen to Mix. I wonder if Diskerud is just soured by the entire MLS experience, if he goes back to Scandinavia, somewhere where he's comfortable. I do think he could be a very good player for another MLS team if he finds the right fit, if he plays for a team that maybe lets him fill the Pirlo role that he never had the chance to with NYCFC. But
Mix, if you're listening, good luck. With you got a kind of a raw deal. I don't know. Moving on.
Well, we've been talking a lot about NYC, whatever their name is.
New York City Football Club. Say the name.
New York City Football Club. But we haven't really talked a lot about the team that just beat them 7-0. Your presumed favorite in the East now, longtime MLS disappointment, Toronto FC.
Running rampant.
7-0, even against a team that's as much of a garbage fire in the back as NYCFC. That's impressive. I think
they really have made Josie look like a good soccer player, though.
I think Josie is a good soccer player.
I know.
Saw him short a little bit there. But yeah, when you combine the moves they made on their back line, which continue to pay dividends in terms of adding guys like Beitashour and Moore and Morrow and Irwin, with now actually having Michael Bradley healthy, playing well. Same goes for Altidore. Same goes for Giovinco. Osorio is looking like a real building block for that team, and he's actually Canadian. By the way, it's pretty funny. There's 2 Canadian teams in the Eastern Conference Final, and yesterday they started a combined 2 Canadian players, Osorio and Patrice Bernier. But, this is a team, when you look on paper, they're miles ahead of Montreal and even the other teams that are left, Colorado, Seattle. It's hard to see any of them beating Toronto FC on the kind of form they're in.
Deep, too. You have guys like Will Johnson and Herc on the bench,
Herc?
What? No,
what?
sorry. Oh, yeah.
That was last year.
Rewind 1 year, exactly.
Tosaint Ricketts.
That's what.
If that's how you pronounce his first name. He's been a nice striker off the bench for them. Yeah, they're deep, and they've also gave Mauro Biello a lot of credit for the tactical decisions he's made with Montreal. Toronto FC turned to a formation they barely used during the regular season, implemented it for the regular season finale, and have rode it through the postseason. A 3-5-2 where you have Nick Hagglund stepping into the lineup, Morrow and Beitashour playing as wingbacks after they were the left back and right back all season, and that has worked really well because it gives you it puts their biggest playmakers in a position to succeed. You have Michael Bradley has the players around him, Cooper and Osorio in central
Hercules
midfield.
Gomez,
and then you can fit Giovinco and Josie up top and provide support for them. Have Osorio combining with them and also Morrow in particular. Beitashour's done well, but Morrow has really embraced the move to left wing back and has been kind of dangerous for them getting forward. So you have to admire what Greg Vanney has done in terms of finding a formation that gets the most out of those big name players, and all of that in mind, I think they are the MLS Cup favorite among the teams that we still have left.
Let's move on to the West, but not for too long, because there was not a whole lot of intrigue yesterday. For Colorado and LA, the only note we have written here is Colorado smothers the game with a pillow like Connor Doyle. That's why he's on the team. Anything to add to that?
Oh my God, I forgot Connor Doyle was on that team. I'm just not gonna lie.
They loaned him out for the second half of the season.
And the way that I momentarily forgot that Hercules Gomez was on the Sounders, I momentarily forgot that Connor Doyle was on the Colorado Rapids. Is on the Colorado Rapids.
The Rapids, it's funny. They just played 2 legs that went 210 minutes, scored 1 goal, which is pretty typical for them. Still advanced, and that's really the story of their season. They've been one of the lowest scoring teams in MLS. Nothing really special in terms of combination play or creating chances. They just wait for someone like Gashi to make something out of nothing. Wait for Jermaine Jones to make a
you knew when
forward.
it went to PKs that it was over with Howard. You knew it was over.
Yeah, Howard versus Brian Rowe is
especially with no Donovan there to take PKs, no Keane there to take PKs.
Keane was on the field. I think they were saving him for 5th.
Okay, yeah, never got there.
But they had also 2 Englishmen.
Yeah,
that
Ashley
never
Cole,
goes
who'd
well.
never taken a PK. Gerard did well with his.
Gerard made his, but
Yeah.
Ashley Cole, allowed us
bad.
to make the
That was
Englishman PK fail.
Yeah.
Jeff Lorenowitz, who actually is a pretty good PK taker. He had taken them for Chicago the past few years. His wasn't great. Howard read it really well. You really got the sense that once Gio blew his PK over the crossbar, that the Galaxy just spiraled. That was it. And I was a little disappointed that Donovan never really got in the groove the way I thought he was going to. Maybe this is what happens when you come out of retirement abruptly.
You figure he has to come back next year now, right? I was just like, no way. I think he's going to have this be the taste he leaves in everyone's mouth.
I don't know. I feel like in terms of the narrative of his career, this is like a weird epilogue everyone's going to forget if he just re-retires at the end of the season. People will still remember 2014 as him gloriously coming out on top, and then this was like a disappointing
It helps that he's wearing
encore.
a completely different number even. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the Michael Jordan 45 thing,
I agree. The way that he made it sound was that he only did so. He only
'Cause
came out of
they had
retirement
injury
because it was an
issues
emergency, and he just wanted to help out, and there weren't really a whole lot of expectations, and he did all right. Seattle FCD. This one was over after the first leg. This one arguably was over after Mauro Diaz got hurt.
Yeah.
Tough break for FCD. Definitely a team that looked as likely as any to complete the mythical MLS treble, which has still yet to be done.
Do you know that in my MLS playoffs bracket, every single team I picked lost? Like, I don't even know what the odds are of that. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't pick one correct team.
Was that just the last round, or are you talking knockout games too?
Oh, yeah, everything.
What?
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Not one correct pick. I picked DC United. I picked the Red Bulls. I picked, I don't know. I'll have to pull it up. But yeah. I feel like the odds of that are probably like 1 in millions.
I'll say this. We were talking about how the series was over when Diaz got hurt. I saw a ton of people in the MLS pundit community still picking Dallas to make an MLS Cup run.
We talked about this on this show.
Yeah,
I said, they're still as likely as anybody else to do it.
Castillo and Diaz, I just didn't see it. That's one too many blows. You can afford to lose one of them, but once you lose 2, that's it.
Yeah, let's move on to some general MLS playoff talkers now that we've got a couple weeks between the conference semifinals and the conference final. The first thing that I think is interesting from an MLS standpoint is how upset are they at the results yesterday? Because you have both New York teams and LA eliminated on the same day. You have the possibility that Colorado will be hosting MLS Cup if they get past Seattle. It could still work out because you have this Canadian rivalry in the Eastern Conference Final, and I think there's a lot of intrigue there for the neutral fan. But
and some the potential for some huge crowds too.
Right. We've got word that they've moved the first leg in Montreal to Olympic Stadium. BMO Field has been expanded. Thomas, it was 28.
Yeah, BMO Field.
I wonder if Drogba even plays there.
I mean, I actually didn't think of that because he hasn't played on turf all year. But I mean, it's a playoff game, and they'll probably only ask him to play 15 minutes.
He'll probably be back in Qatar or something by then anyways. So.
BMO Field is 28,000 after the renovation at the beginning of the season, but they are hosting the Grey Cup, the Canadian Super Bowl, and have put in temporary seating to bring it up to 35,000. So, I mean, we could easily have a combined attendance over these two legs of over 80,000. So that would be quite the spectacle, quite the series to really allow MLS to plant its flag in the Canadian market. And although I'm sure they would have loved to have NYCFC still alive and have, all the attention on Pirlo and Lampard and David Villa, to have, Drogba's still in it. That's not nothing. You have
You're the league's best player in it.
Yeah,
And you have two
Javinko.
U.S. national team stars.
Exactly. There's some big names, and it's a chance for them to really make sure that the Canadian side of their business plan has a showcase.
Listen, the MLS only thing more capable than Donald Trump of fabricating storylines. So I'm pretty sure that they'll get it done. They'll hype it as something. But yeah,
So what does MLS hype up when it's Colorado against Montreal for the MLS Cup?
So much free weed, so much legal weed.
Yes, Seattle, Colorado is the 420 derby.
Exactly. Yeah. I was afraid that they always schedule that on. It's like the inside joke of a schedule makers or something like that.
Yeah, but after tomorrow, which is election day, if you're listening to this in the future, there could be many more states which are on that list.
Yeah, I mean, do any of these series even happen if Trump gets elected? That's another thing we haven't even delved into.
I mean, I think
there might be a lot more interest in this Canadian derby.
The real thing we have to talk about are the U.S.-Mexico implications of a possible Trump electoral college win.
Dos a cero. That was my Trump. I'm sorry, it's not very good.
Yeah, I got it though. But I mean, back to what we were saying. How hard is MLS rooting for Seattle to beat Colorado? Because if Colorado wins, then no matter who comes out of the East is going to Colorado. And now you have MLS Cup taking place in December in Denver. Not good weather, smaller stadium.
At altitude,
outside of the city. Not a very energized fan base.
Everybody's high.
Everyone's stoned.
That would not be ideal. Colorado really, in terms of mainstream appeal, I mean, I guess the average fan, will know Tim Howard and might find him interesting, but yeah, it's
literally the end of the interest. It's the one player.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of casual fans are like, man, I gotta see Eric Miller. But yeah, the Rapids, yeah, they also tend to play ugly games, so you could have a final that's not much of a spectacle. Not great, but Seattle, Toronto, I mean, that would be a great MLS Cup, I think. CenturyLink Field, or actually that would be in Toronto, right?
Yeah, the only team.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I think MLS Cup in Toronto or Seattle would be great.
Sure.
Either of those two venues can put on a great MLS Cup. I'm sure we'll sell out a large stadium and really give it more of a spectacle feel. But Colorado hosting MLS Cup, you can praise the team a lot for what they did this season. I remember back in January, February, there was a lot of talk of, what are the Rapids doing? They might be one of the worst teams in MLS history. They began preseason with only 16 or 17 active players on their roster. They were just jettisoning guys and not signing anyone. They were linked to Carlos Vela and Alan Pulido, and none of those worked out. But then
I think Mastroeni finally found the right collection of crystals to pray to before the game, or something. I still can't figure it out. But
yeah. I mean,
whatever they're doing, it's horrible to watch. But congratulations. Maybe Pablo hopped on the phone with Ben or something like that. Who knows?
Thomas, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't get to your favorite MLS playoff topic, which once again manifested itself in these series, which is that the higher seed gets no advantage from the away goal rule and from hosting the second leg in place of the first leg. MLS has been tweaking the system forever, and they just have not seemed to be able to find a way to really give an advantage to regular season performance.
Okay, very quickly, and then you can speak about this at length.
Ready for my rant.
Yeah, none of the higher seeds even looked like they would have won with any advantage this year.
Yeah, I'll say when NYCFC loses their home leg 5-0, it probably wasn't going to happen for them.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think you blame this one on away goals or something,
So that said, I feel like there's a bit of unknown about the playoff series this year because even though we didn't get any concrete examples where it's like, man, this team would have had extra time on their home field in the second leg, but instead they lose on away goals, which happened a few years ago when the Sounders won the Supporters' Shield and then were eliminated on away goals in kind of a brutal playoff exit for them. But I think the problem is when you play the first leg on the road, it just changes the entire tone of the series. Like when you look at what happened to the Red Bulls, maybe if they play the first leg at home, they make Montreal travel on short rest after the knockout round game. Maybe that first leg looks a lot different. Maybe the Red Bulls get out to a lead. Instead, they're playing their home leg.
Why not play both legs at home?
That's interesting. I think MLS in general, one of the reasons for this format is that they want fans to experience home playoff games.
I mean, have you read Simon Evans' piece? They could do like a best of 14 or something like that, in the semifinals. I don't know.
I do like the old school best of 3. Bring back the old MLS shootout.
I thought that was an interesting piece, but at no point in the piece was he like, MLS used to operate this way.
Yeah.
And it made me wonder, like, does he just not realize that they used to do it this way? Or is he just not,
MLS, people also forget that there was a brief period when they had best of 3 series that included ties. Did you guys know this or remember this?
So what would
it would
go to PKs after the third game?
The format was called first to 5. So you got points just like they were regular season games, and the first team to get 5 points won. So one win and 2 ties in the best of 3 series would advance you.
Oh.
Or if you won the first 2 games, you would get the 6 points and clinch.
And people wonder why this league has barely made it, Jesus.
Yeah, but the best of 3 format...
Fans love math,
The best of 3 format, I will say, with all these scheduling issues they face right now, with the international break right in the middle of the playoffs.
Yeah, the playoffs are already a month and a half long.
Yeah.
I mean,
It would be tough logistically to make it work, and also it would be a lot of selling tickets on short notice, I think. And I think just the Liga MX format of allowing the higher seed to go through if it's tied, or at the very least just let the higher seed pick the home leg, because I think, especially after this year, after seeing all the higher seeds fall flat in their opening legs, again, like there weren't any obvious examples of a team that clearly would have advanced if the format were different, but we don't know. Like FC Dallas, if they play their home leg first, they're not chasing the game. They're not wary of allowing an away goal. They're not dealing with all these mental obstacles in the second leg. They can just play freer at home. And then the other thing is, when you play the second leg on the road, you know exactly what you need in terms of away goals. You can go ahead and say, all right, we just need 1 away goal, and that'll be a backbreaker. I think that is a bit of an advantage, because when you have the away goals rule, that's a big factor.
We gotta request one. Gervinho? Ivory Coast.
Yeah. Well, so he played with Drogba, who was coached by Mauro Biello, who played for the Rochester Rhinos. Come on.
It wasn't mine, all right? One of our viewers want, Jesus Christ, man. All right, anyways.
Wait, Gervinho, former Arsenal player? Is that who it was? Like now with
I
Roma?
think you're talking about the Ivory Coast Gervinho.
Yeah, that's the same player. Right.
Going to Wikipedia.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, never mind. So we got about 10 minutes left. Should we get into U.S.-Mexico?
Sure. Why not?
Yeah. So I wanted to touch on a couple points from the roster rather than go into too much of an actual game preview. The first thing that stuck out for me on the roster was that Jermaine Jones and Michael Bradley are the only two real defensive center midfielders. Bradley, of course, in the past has been played more advanced. I think Klinsmann now is starting to realize, along with the rest of the world, that he's probably better suited to a more number 6 role. But Jermaine Jones missed about 5 months and only recently returned for Colorado. I believe he had his first start for Colorado in 5 months yesterday. So there are no alternatives on this roster outside of those two. There's no Danny Williams. There's no Perry Kitchen, which makes you think that both of those players are liable to start against Mexico, and I wonder what the implications of that are going to be for the U.S.
I think the roster, when you look at it, there's been a little bit of an evolution in Klinsmann's thinking in terms of what he wants out of his two central midfielders. I think he's a little more open to an attack-minded player next to Michael Bradley. I think there's a good chance we could see Sasha Kljestan there if he's okay post broken nose in his playoff game yesterday. Also, Alejandro Bedoya has been playing as a 6 for the Union, so maybe that's an option. The last time he played in that type of role for the U.S., he was subbed in the 30th minute or so of a game against Brazil and then sort of thrown out under the bus by Klinsmann post-game. So, yeah, we'll see if that actually happens. And Caleb Stanko is a central midfield option. I believe he's a little more of an attack-minded player, but I think that's where Klinsmann sees him. I'd have a hard time seeing the U.S. turn to him in a big game like the Dos Acero match, but there are options there. Also, Klinsmann has been kind of famous for, during his U.S. tenure, of calling in a roster that maybe has a somewhat glaring deficiency like this and then addressing it with a late call-up a few days later. So I wouldn't be surprised if we get a email in our inbox in 2 or 3 days. It's like, Danny Williams summoned for U.S. camp. So we'll see. I do think that relying on Jones is a little risky, though, considering he just made his first start since July 4th on Sunday. And although he looked great, and I think he's going to start against Mexico, and I actually do think that's the right decision considering his experience and his fight and the way he looked Sunday. I don't know if you want him starting both matches, if he can handle the travel down to Costa Rica and then playing another game on short rest.
Yeah, I think another interesting decision for Klinsmann is obviously at center back. Jeff Cameron injured, not called in, and you figure obviously he's going to give a nod either to Steve Birnbaum or Omar Gonzalez. You have to think Omar has the edge, right? Obviously, he's played in these games before, coming off a killer season.
Yeah. Omar has a few things going in his favor. He started both U.S.-Mexico games during the last hex, and the U.S. did not concede a goal in either of those matches, so that's a positive for him. Also, directly comparing him to Birnbaum, Omar is playing game in, game out for Pachuca and Liga MX, and Birnbaum has not played since late October when DC got bounced early from the playoffs. So it's not a huge layoff. I'm sure Birnbaum has been staying fit, but it might be enough to give Omar the edge. That said, I wouldn't be shocked if he turned to Birnbaum just because he's been ahead of Omar on the depth chart since May or so when he made the Copa America roster over Gonzalez. And it's also a situation where Gonzalez, his last few appearances for the U.S., particularly that March qualifier against Guatemala, didn't go great, and that's the type of thing that seems to have stuck in Klinsmann's mind.
I also wonder about who's going to start right back. I think DeAndre Yedlin is the obvious choice. He's been starting for Newcastle. They're doing pretty well in the championship. But the only reason I would say that we could be in for a surprise there is Klinsmann was pretty vocal about his displeasure with the way that Yedlin went through the last U.S. national team pair of friendlies last month. Specifically just called him out in the press conference after the New Zealand game. Looking at the roster, you do have Michael Roscoe who could play right back. Even you have Steve Birnbaum who's played a little bit of right back for the U.S. national team. I would expect Yedlin to be there. Also, Thomas is pointing out I'm missing one very key player who is Timothy Chandler. I think a lot of national team fans feel the way you do, Pablo, but it's worth noting that Chandler is starting for Frankfurt in the Bundesliga, and they are having a pretty strong season, as is Timothy Chandler.
Don't care.
I've been thinking since Klinsmann called out Yedlin after that friendly against New Zealand at RFK that Chandler could very well end up starting against Mexico. He's a player who Klinsmann has always liked. He brought him to the World Cup, even though he had basically been a non-factor in the U.S. picture for the previous year in the build-up to Brazil. And he's gotten sporadic call-ups. He was named to the Copa America roster. I feel like people kind of forget, but he had to withdraw with an injury. So I think this is going to be a match where maybe we see Chandler get a little bit of a surprise start just because he's a guy who, is starting game in, game out against quality opposition in the Bundesliga. And although those performances have not really translated to the national team, he's someone that Klinsmann clearly likes and trusts to a degree. And with Yedlin, there's a certain amount of risk when he plays at right back, even though he's been such a he really has improved over the past year, getting experience with Sunderland in the Premier League last season. You still see some of the growing pains as he learns to play that position as a game in, game out player after being used on the wing a lot earlier. And in a big game against Mexico, I would think that Klinsmann might be tempted by Chandler. Just a year ago in the CONCACAF Cup, he turned to DeMarcus Beasley and had Yedlin on the bench, moving Fabian Johnson to right back. So it makes you wonder how much Klinsmann trusts Yedlin when the games are really big.
Yeah, there's one more player I think opened a lot of eyes with his inclusion on the roster, and that was Cameron Carter-Vickers. 18 years old, Tottenham Hotspur. He, I believe, has played in just one game for the Tottenham senior team this year, but he has been making the bench pretty frequently. In the one game I saw him play against Liverpool, which was in the League Cup, he looked completely out of his depth. I understand that he is a very good prospect. Anyone who's 18 and making the bench for a team like Tottenham is someone who clearly has a bright future. I know that Pochettino, the Tottenham manager, thinks very highly of him, but to bring somebody like Carter-Vickers on this roster for games like Mexico in Columbus and at Costa Rica, you have to imagine that this is somebody who's being brought in not necessarily to play, but he's being brought in because Klinsmann does this occasionally with young dual nationals to bring them in and show them what U.S. national team camp is like, and also to show that the U.S. is interested in them.
Yeah, keep them strung along a little bit.
Right. Carter-Vickers has eligibility for England. There hasn't been any sort of indication from him that he's really considering playing for England, but who knows? That could change. Certainly, it would be more convenient for an English-based player to represent England if he's good enough. But it is a little strange to use a spot on the roster. It is a 26-man roster.
But you can't see him getting into the 18. You figure it's a situation where Klinsmann would only sort of cap tie him if they're up 2-3-0 in one of these two games, and even then, he has to be on the bench. He seems a long shot to even make the game day roster. Yeah,
I think that this is a scenario that is what Seth was talking about. I think it's entirely he's coming in just to see the camp, take part in that environment, know that the U.S. is interested. This is basically a chance for Klinsmann to make sure that any temptation he has to potentially play for England is, pushed far to the back of his mind.
I mean,
He's
basically
focused on
exactly
the
what he
US.
should do with Thomas McNamara. I understand what you're saying.
Because when you look at the center backs, I mean, they have Birnbaum, they have Gonzalez, they have Beasler, they have Brooks, they have Orozco. I mean, he's probably the fourth string right center back. Like, he's probably the last guy on this roster aside from the extra goalkeepers who's going to see the field, unless they just throw him on the bottom of a game day roster in hopes of a blowout where they can put him in as an 89th minute sub and cap time.
Yeah, it is a 26-man roster, and the game day roster is 23, so I would be pretty surprised if he even makes that 23. I don't think that Klinsmann's going to mess with cap tying him in any of these games, nor are either of these games going to be enough of a blowout to put someone like him in, although maybe they'll get blown out in Costa Rica. But definitely, not a bad idea to show someone like him that you're following him and interested as a future part of the team. All right, folks. Well, that'll do it. Thanks for joining us, and we will talk to you next week.